Hi, everyone. This is Matt from Denver.
Matt from Denver, what's on your mind?
So, do you remember a caller from a few months back named Miguel, the liberal Republican?
No.
So, to catch everyone up, he was basically a young Republican going to college in Texas and called in saying, hey, I really like a lot of your policies. Can we reform the Republican Party to support some of these things?
And my response was probably, no.
Yeah, that was your response, everybody in the chat. But I mentioned him because that's who I was just a few years ago. I was raised Republican, voted for McCain after my 18th birthday, but slowly over the years, I drifted left. And I think there's two important things we can learn from this, is that, first off, being Republican is such a big part of your identity that even as I started to learn about liberal and leftist policies and how I was really supporting them, I still just had a hard time calling myself a liberal or a Democrat.
Yeah, and, that makes sense to me.
Oh, good.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then the other thing was, like, I bought into these Republican policies early on because I'm like, oh, personal freedoms, that's a good thing. And yeah, everybody should have a chance in America. And I just realized, like, the thing that caused me to turn left is I realized that the Republican policies didn't do what we were told that they were.
How did you realize that?
So it was really just seeing various effective policies, like if I think back, it's really the failure of trickle-down policies, where, okay, so the rich people get all the money, and then what? Or like the fact that it's very expensive to be poor, so how are people supposed to just bootstrap their way out of it?
So when you say like their policies did not match, what you understood their policies as being like sort of primarily for economic benefit, is that it?
Yeah, like that's the line you're told, especially like as a kid growing up in a Republican household. It's like Republican policies are better because it reinforces like personal responsibility and like the country thrives when like people take responsibility for themselves, and people who are in a certain position earned their way to it. So you should earn your position. Did you grow up in Colorado? That I did.
I wonder if that is like, you know, that Colorado is, you know, slightly divergent than as opposed to if you had been in the South, where it's more sort of like culturally oriented, because that is like sort of like, that sounds a little bit more sort of, you know, the libertariany, less like conservative movementy republicanism. But how did you see that, for instance, trickle-down economics didn't work? Like, what was do you remember, like, other than seeing things not work, like, where did you see an example of that?
Oh, it's hard to think back since this was quite a few years ago. Yeah, I don't remember a single specific thing. It's more like a whole bunch of little things added up over the years when I was just paying attention and listening to things other than Fox News.
Right. Yeah, Kansas was a perfect example of that I really lament that was not sort of amplified enough. I mean, this is the guy who came up with essentially, you know, sort of the fundamental building block of trickle-down economics was this guy, Arthur Laffer, who had provided this sort of graph that, you know, I think it was adopted during the Reagan era. The idea that, like, you know, if you tax people too much, they start making less money, and that there is an optimal tax point where you will get it, and it's extremely low. In fact, it's like zero. And Sam Brownback instituted this in Kansas, cut essentially like corporate taxes, severely diminished taxes, and it really destroyed the public higher education system in Kansas. And so much so that Brownback, the Republican legislature had to vote to bring back taxes. And Brownback, I think, like during the Trump years, was sent into oblivion. He was literally, I think, the ambassador to faith.
Oh, right. He was.
If you can believe it. I think it was exactly that. Like, the ambassador of faith. We had to get him out of, like, he was like jettisoned into space, I think it was, so that he could be closer to God as a way of, but that's interesting. Well, do you walk the land now, trying to help Republican youth like you were find the truth?
When I encounter them, I try not to go out online because those discussions are never productive. But whenever I encounter somebody in person, I just try and bring up a few points, being like, hey, the left actually has the solutions for the problems that like populist right wing claims to solve.
Yep. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
There's a book out. Oh crap! I just lost the reference, but it's about anti-communism on the Northern Plains. Let's see, I have the link here, but then maybe we should get on. But it's basically made the argument that like people in like the Dakotas weren't that interested in like the sort of ideological sort of anti-communism, but when you started activating religion and like the atheist threat got people on board.